Captain Midnight.
This video was brought to you by Nebula. So, some huge news dropped recently that I knew I just had to talk about. Apparently, CBS is doing a new version of Matlock starring the one and only Kathy Bates. The hardcore Matlock fandom is losing their minds right now. Oh, and also DC announced some new superhero stuff. Much like his fellow detective Matlock, it's looking like Batman will be recast. But before I get into the Batman of it all, I should probably talk about the new vision for the DC universe that James Gunn unveiled. They're calling it Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters. Not to be confused with the very fun 2015 DC animated movie of the same name. I'll talk about some of the specific projects, but one of the biggest headlines here I think is maybe getting a little bit overlooked. Gunn saying that all the movies, TV shows, and even video games will be set in a connected universe. Now, there is a caveat to that, but I think this is easily the most ambitious element in all this, and to be honest, I have a hard time picturing it working. Like, film, television, and video games just have such different development processes, not to mention just how long it takes to make a game. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of tone this down over time, but we'll see. It'll be really interesting to see if they can actually make that work. Now, getting to the actual projects, it's clear that trying to change DC's output is kind of like turning a giant tanker truck. You can't just do it on a dime. A lot of these inherited projects will still come out. Shazam 2, Aquaman 2, and The Flash being the big ones, with The Flash setting up an in-continuity reason for the universe swapping. Then there's things like the Batman Part 2 and the Joker sequel, which are now being called Elseworld projects, not in continuity with Chapter 1. This is really interesting to me, honestly, because I'm kind of torn about it. On one hand, I think it's a good idea for DC to make stuff that doesn't have to worry about the continuity of like a dozen other projects. Plus, if say there was a video game in development that took way longer than expected and no longer makes sense in current continuity, they could just declare it an Elseworld project, which would be kind of a useful out for them. I also just really like Elseworld stories in DC Comics. I think they're often some of the most fun stuff that the company does. But, and I know this is the part where I may lose a lot of you, is this all getting a bit too insider baseball for your average moviegoer? I mean, Elseworld stories, The Flash resetting the entire universe, multiple Batmen at the same time in totally unrelated movies. It's a lot, and it's extremely comic booky, which I do think will alienate some people. To be fair, after over a decade of the MCU, maybe this won't really faze people as much as I think. Still, I think DC really needs to avoid making any of this feel like homework. Lots of people love the Batman movies, from Adam West to Burton to Nolan and beyond, but I think a decent portion of them are going to just tune out when you start talking about The Flash changing the entire universe, and would prefer just a clean break. Going down that road can easily lead to the kind of convoluted storytelling that makes comic books feel impenetrable to some people. Gunn seems to really believe in The Flash though, so maybe it'll be good enough to overcome both functioning as a reset button for a giant movie studio and starring Ezra Miller. That's kind of a lot to put on one movie. Now, the Joker sequel feels like a perfect fit for the Elseworld concept, but then there's the Batman Part 2. I'm really excited about this movie. Even after all these announcements, it's definitely one of my most anticipated things on DC's release slate. But they're also bringing in a new Batman that will function as the official Chapter 1 Bats. And that's a lot of Batman. This Batman trilogy is going to be going on at the same time as there's a more Bat family focused movie opening, and that's going to be kind of bizarre. I do think there's some danger there. If there's a glut of Batman movies, it's going to make each individual one feel like less of an event, which I think has partially been Disney's problem with Star Wars. And Batman films have kind of always been an event. Still, if they're, actually good, maybe that won't matter. The new movie, titled Brave and the Bold, could have a lot going for it in my book. The Bat family has been a largely untapped goldmine for Batman movies, Schumacher films aside, and I'm excited to finally see how that translates to the big screen. Still, and maybe I'll sound like a cranky old man for saying this, why did we have to start with Damian? There's a lot of Damian stuff that I'll admit I have not read yet, but he's never been a favorite of mine. The kid can get a little too young Sheldon. And especially with Dick Grayson's decades-long complex relationship with Bruce as his father figure just sitting right there, I'll admit that I would have preferred that. there's also a bunch of TV shows coming out. In addition to the Batman's Penguin spinoff, we have Lanterns, Waller, Booster Gold, and Creature Commandos. Now, while I actually love Booster Gold as a character, it's Creature Commandos that I'm most excited about. It feels like a perfect fit for animation, and with the success of Amazon Prime's Invincible, I'm really desperate to see more of these animated projects with a decent budget and scale. I know HBO Max has been really hard on their animation lately. They're removing legitimate classics, and hopefully this is a sign that they still have some interest in it. I like the look of the show quite a bit too, at least from what we can see so far. Waller isn't all that interesting to me besides Viola Davis starring, which definitely is a big get. Booster Gold has potential. I'm hoping they're able to pull off the comedy well. HBO Max, that can kind of go either way. And then there's Lanterns, which seems like it'll be a big budget epic of a show, with Gunn also comparing it to True Detective. Green Lantern seems very hard to pull off in live action, especially if it's going to have the grim, self-serious tone of True Detective. I mean, I want to say I'm cautiously optimistic, but honestly I'm mostly just cautious. Paradise Lost, I want to see more from this one. I guess we'll see how close to Patty Jenkins' Themyscira that they decide to stick.
In search of a cosmic power source that could save her world from destruction.
I think I recognize the costume.
Superman Legacy is the relaunch of the Big Blue Boy Scout, with Gunn himself writing the script. Now, we already knew about this movie, and I talked about it in my previous DC video, but it's nice to have a title confirmed at least. Honestly, I think this is the most important film of this lineup, at least to DC itself. This will be the first time we really get a look at what Chapter 1 will be on the big screen, and if it's terrible, that's going to be pretty tough for Gunn and company. Honestly though, I kind of have a good feeling about this one. There's been a lot of great Superman comics through the years, recent War World stuff included. I just feel like there's so much more to draw from than people are really giving the character credit for. I know many Snyder and Cavill fans will have their knives out for this, and I can't really blame them, but I want to see if Gunn can really write a character as earnest as Superman. Supergirl and The Authority are interesting picks for big movies, especially The Authority, which feels like a huge risk that may be better suited for TV. But it's a pretty great comic, and I'm glad it'll be getting this huge spotlight regardless. With the success of The Boys, maybe DC can see that there's a taste for these kind of dark twists on superhero teams. Now, Supergirl feels risky in a different way. This is a character best known to general audience for a CW show, and I'm not sure that association will really help this film feel like a big event. Now, The Flash is maybe in that same boat, so I guess we'll see how it goes. Now, hopefully, Supergirl will at least be better than the 1984 film, which shouldn't be that hard. Then there's Swamp Thing. I'm gonna be honest, if I could pick one of these movies to be truly great, I would pick Swamp Thing. One of the best characters in the DC universe, with an absolutely amazing lineup of great comics, from Alan Moore to Brian K. Vaughan, and so many more. A film tackling Swamp Thing's origins has so much potential. The twist that Alan Moore added to what had been a pretty standard monster origin story was just incredible, and I encourage anyone who isn't familiar with him to seek those comics out. They're some of the best stuff that DC has ever published. And with James Mangold tweeting out some Swamp Thing art, it's looking pretty likely that he'll direct. My personal pick would have been Robert Eggers, honestly, but I'm totally fine with him continuing to do his own thing, and I'm sure that Mangold could work really well. I want to be super excited by this lineup, I really do, but I'll be honest, right now this is very much a wait and see type of thing for me. DC has just been a mess for so long, and I'm not sure a strict universe uniting everything is really the answer. But at least the Elseworld concept shows that they're willing to go beyond that universe if a good story calls for it. I will say there are some interesting picks here. They didn't just go for the obvious. For every Superman, there's The Authority. I do think that's encouraging, even if it could totally blow up in their face. At the very least, 2025 is getting set up to be a make it or break it year for DC, and I can't wait to see what they have in store. DC has obviously been all over the map with its releases, but it's easy to forget that pre-MCU, Marvel was a lot more unpredictable too, like with the very strange 2003 Hulk. That is a movie I made a video about, and I do talk about the Hulk Poodles. You can find it right now on my streaming service, Nebula. Nebula has been great for creators. It's a place where we're free to experiment without this website's algorithm. But it's amazing for viewers too, because not only is there exclusive videos, it also cuts out ads entirely. All my videos on there are ad-free, and that exclusive content is coming from creators like Patrick H. Willems, Windover Productions, Low Spec Gamer, and so many more. Now normally, Nebula costs $5 a month, but you can get it for just half that by signing up for a year with a special sale you'll find in the link in the description. With more and more exclusive content being added all the time, this deal just keeps getting better. So use the link in the description to get Nebula and support hundreds of independent creators.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.